r/NoSleep. Posted by you/thepurplefeline. My first 3 days working at a family-run funeral home. Part 1. The fact that you have a business degree on top of being certified as a mortician is the main reason why we hired you. Oh, that's great to hear. I thought my business degree was just a waste of time and money. I respond. Your main responsibility will be to try pushing for open casket viewings, because that's where the bulk of our money comes from, on top of our high-end caskets. So I won't be preparing any of the bodies? No, since we are a family-run business, I have my 2 sons, Paul and Henry, to help me. The 50-something-year-old man named Nathaniel says to me. Okay, that's not what I was expecting, but I'm fine with that. I think sometimes I come across as too old school and aggressive at times, so having you as a younger, more polished female will really help us. Okay, whatever you think will work best. Do you prefer to go by Patricia or Trish? Trish is fine. You realize that this is a 24-hour-a-day business, where we are at the beck and call of someone's loved one who has passed away. Plus my specialty is stitching together some of the more gruesome facial and head wounds. Yes, I do understand the nature of the business and I look forward to seeing your work. Okay then, you can come in and start working tomorrow. As I get in my car, I yell out wow. As I drive away and blast the radio. I'll be making close to $100,000 a year without having to remove a person's blood or use formaldehyde or deal with any other unsettling modalities. I get to my apartment and pick out the outfit that I'm going to wear tomorrow, which is one of the many dress suites that I purchased for my failed business career. I go to sleep in my usual fashion, where I'm alone and watching television. I wake up in a chipper mood, where I'm excited about my new career. I arrive at 9 a.m. and Nathaniel shows me all the different funeral packages and options that the Osterfeld Funeral Home has to offer. Our funeral home has a great reputation, because we try not to turn away any family requests for an open casket viewing, so when a family calls and says something along the lines of "my son died in a horrible car accident and such funeral home said that an open casket wasn't possible," our response here at Osterfeld Funeral Home is always yes, we'll do our best to make your loved one will look his or her best. That's a really great service you offer to the community, I say with admiration. It makes the families happy and in turn we make money. Nathaniel leaves me and I study the funeral home's literature as I wait for a potential customer to show up or call. At about 11:30 a.m., I get a phone call from a woman at Mercy Samaritan Hospital whose 8-year-old daughter was accidentally killed while being exposed to chemicals that her husband had in their garage, that essentially melted the girl's face off. I understand, Mrs. Hernandez, that this is the worst day of your life, but please be reassured that we specialize in having open viewings for even the worst case scenarios, which comes out of my mouth, but makes me feel really unsettled because I don't want to arrive at the hospital with Nathaniel and then say no to the family. I asked the difficult questions about payment and Mrs. Hernandez said that her church had offered to pay for the funeral services. I hang up the phone and Nathaniel and I drive to the hospital in the funeral home's hearse. So this is a young girl whose face was essentially melted away from a chemical accident? Yes, Tata, how the mother explained it to me. She was a little difficult to understand because of her Spanish accent, but I was able to get all the necessary information. And you said that her church was going to be paying for the services? Yes, she made it seem like her congregation was willing to pay for everything and the price was of no concern. Okay, that's really sad to hear about the girl, but we always need to be sure that we will get paid. Nathaniel puts on classic country music as we make our way to the hospital. We pull into the back of the hospital and park near where the morgue is located. Nathaniel and I walk towards the morgue and the security guard recognizes Nathaniel and lets us into the cooler. The security guard unzips the 8-year-old girl's body bag and I let off a screeching sound when I see that the girl's skin is completely removed from her face and all I see is the internal musculature and tendons on her face. Her facial skin, that resembles burnt mozzarella cheese, was placed in a bag, which is on the girl's chest. I can't hold back the tears from seeing the little girl and her missing face. Nathaniel starts to wheel the girl out of the morgue and I say, "Wait, Nathaniel. How can we do an open viewing? Her face is gone?" "No worries," he replies, as if this was a 70-year-old guy who died of a heart attack, with no facial deformities. As Nathaniel heads towards the hearse with the deceased girl, I meet with the devastated parents, in the hospital's chapel, to go over paperwork, where they chose a casket from our brochure rather than coming to the funeral home in person. I continually give my condolences to the parents during this somber experience and I eventually meet back with Nathaniel. We drive back to the funeral home with the deceased little girl in the back of the hearse. You'll be amazed how I will recover some of her skin and use clay to reform her face. Nathaniel says to me, where I nod my head to show that I heard him, but I'm too overcome with emotions after seeing the deceased girl and meeting with her family to say anything. I think to myself that her skin is in nothing more than mangled clumps in a plastic bag, so recovering anything that is bigger than a millimeter in size isn't possible. I can't stop thinking how the family is going to be horrified when the open viewing occurs. The hearse pulls into the nursing home and Nathaniel's sons, Paul and Henry, meet their father to assist in taking the girl to the embalming table in the basement of the funeral home. The two boys seem to have introverted personalities, where they are shy and Nathaniel does the talking for them. As promised by Nathaniel, I do not partake in the embalming process and instead I go to the funeral home's business office, where I process the paperwork for the Hernandezes and wait for the next phone call or customer to show up. My normal workday ends and I go home, where I remain on call. At my apartment, I keep on telling myself that I will get used to the sight of dead children and eventually I won't get so emotionally frazzled. I watch television before I pass out. I wake up the next morning and head into work. I go over the Hernandez paperwork with Nathaniel and I'm surprised to hear that he has finished preparing the girl's body. He said that he worked all night and that him and his sons would be going to their house to go to sleep. The Osterfeld's house is only about 30 yards away, where I see the three of them walk to the house. The business office is quiet, so I decide to go into the viewing room where the deceased girl is laid out. I do my best to brace myself before looking at the girl's face. The top half of the casket is closed, so I slowly open it. "What the hell?" comes out of my mouth, where I'm shocked at what I am seeing. "How did he do this?" next comes flying out of my mouth. I was expecting to see a monstrosity, but instead I see an almost perfectly preserved little girl's face. One of the reasons why I wanted to be a mortician was because I like the makeup end of the business, especially where I don't have to interact with the clients, but this is beyond anything that I could do. I liken Nathaniel's work to one of Michelangelo's masterpieces. I see small remnants of clay and areas that are heavily painted with makeup, but overall it's a real masterpiece. I walk back to the business office, where I get a sense of warmth knowing that in such a horrible situation, that Nathaniel is actually doing something really admirable for the family. Eventually Nathaniel's sons come back and the four of us set up the viewing room for the visitation that will happen tonight. Paul and Henry do most of the work, where they seem to have this down to a science. After helping to set up the viewing room, I go back to the business office and wait for the family and friends to arrive. As the viewing time approaches, Nathaniel and I go to the front door and we meet the parents who are the first to see their deceased daughter. The parents instantaneously cry, where I hug the both of them. They are both very gratuitous for the work that Nathaniel has done, where the mother says thank you several times while she hysterically cries. The rest of the family and friends show up and I stay in the back of the viewing room and offer my condolences to anyone that I can. I need a break so I go outside, where there is nobody else besides the father's brother, who has just finished smoking a cigarette. He has the demeanor of someone who is either a biker or spent time in prison or probably both. I refrain from using my phone out of respect, as the man walks towards my direction to go back into the viewing area. As he passes me, he says that's not Valeria, in a serious tone. "You are her uncle, right?" I ask him. "Yes, and that's not my niece. Her spirit is now in heaven," I respond. "That's true, but that's not her body in that casket," he says with an angry tone. "I'm not sure what you are saying?" Where the man's anger is starting to make me feel uncomfortable. "Listen, coming from Colombia, I've seen some really fucked up shit done by the drug cartels and equally more so when I served in Iraq to get my citizenship, but this is probably the most fucked up shit that I've ever come across. Sir, I understand that you're upset, but I still don't understand your point. You guys found some other Latino-looking girl and put makeup on her and put her in that casket." I stay silent for a few moments while my mind entertains what this man is alleging. "Sir, I went to the hospital to help retrieve Valeria's body." "You probably did, but that's not her in there." "Sir, I'm still not sure what you mean. Her parents have viewed her and everyone else and no one is saying what you're saying." "Because my brother and his wife's minds are in a different place right now, so they're seeing what they want to see. And you know how these things go where no one expects the body to look exactly the same, but I've been with her since she was born and I'm saying that you're a bunch of fucking ghouls." I'm left speechless, where yesterday I was expecting to be yelled out by the family for displaying the girl's mangled face, however being accused of being a body snatcher is completely unexpected. I continue to look lost as the man then says, "How much money are you guys getting from this?" I again remain silent, where I know the figure is $13,000. The man slowly walks back into the viewing room, where I hear the click-clack of his boots hit the cement. I continue to stay outside, where my mind can't get over what that man just told me, where I've been called everything from a bitch to a slut in my life, but no one has ever hinted towards me being a body snatcher. I force myself back into the funeral home, where I stand in the back of the viewing room and I zone out and nod my head to anyone that passes me. The viewing closes for the night and the girl's uncle makes sure that he gives me a really dirty look before he leaves. The funeral home empties and I decide to hang out in the business office for a while. Nathaniel thanks me and then him and his sons leave to go home. Before he left, I told him that I just wanted to be sure that I had all the paperwork in order. I watch the three of them walk back to their house and then I go to the viewing room, where I open the casket. This time I carefully inspect the girl's face. I see stitch marks that was concealed with makeup. After a minute of studying the girl's face, I can't stop shaking my head in disgust, once I come to the realization that this isn't Valeria. It's obvious that the stitch marks were intentionally placed to make it look like skin was meshed together, but I can tell that the skin is too uniformly joined, where there were intentional cuts placed that were sewn back together. I learned how to properly stitch skin back in school, and even my novice eyes can tell that this is not a girl who suffered horrendous facial injuries. My mind drifts into a deep dark place as I look at this girl and wonder who she actually is. I haven't been prepared enough in life to really comprehend the bowels of evilness that I'm looking at right now. My mind drifts back to leaving the hospital, then driving in the hearse back to here, then leaving to go home. It doesn't take long before I realize that they cremated Valeria last night, where I swore I smelled something burning when I arrived this morning, but I chalked it up to someone's chimney smoke. I feel disgusted beyond belief, where I look at my phone to check the news to see if anyone had died overnight to hopefully see where they got this other girl's body from. Then I come across a national headline that criticizes the failed attempt to secure the border with Mexico and the treatment of the migratory people. Oh God. I start to cry out once I realize what that bastard, Nathaniel, and his sons are doing. This can't be possible. I then blurt out, as I walk back to the business office. I then look through the files of the past funerals and I see names such as Lopez, Garcia, Rodriguez, where it doesn't take me long to figure out that somehow poor migratory bodies are being used in this dark enterprise. I pick up the phone in the office and I hesitate to call 911. I think to myself, if I'm wrong, then I will be forever shunned from working in this business. I look on the wall and I see a photo of Satan's asshole himself, standing next to his two sons. I then realize that I'm more scared of the repercussions that will happen to me, considering that this is a multi-generational family-run business, that probably has been doing this since Lincoln was alive. I think to myself that they thought they were hiring just some dumb young woman, who wouldn't be able to piece this macabre business practice together, but the girl's uncle has realized what's going on, so I can't stop thinking about what happens to people who speak up. I can't control my breathing as I decide not to call 911 and hang up the phone.